Every year, insects kill more people than sharks, crocodiles, snakes, and bears combined. Not the predators that haunt our nightmares, the ones you can crush beneath a fingernail. That is not a metaphor. That is a documented biological fact, and for most of human history, we had no framework to understand it. This episode counts 13 species. The selection was not arbitrary. Each one was chosen against a fixed set of criteria: the mechanism of harm, confirmed casualty numbers, biological distinctiveness, and what researchers call the horror coefficient, the capacity to cause damage so far out of proportion to body size that it strains credibility until you look at the evidence. Some of them kill in seconds. Others work slowly, quietly dismantling organs over years while the host goes about their life. And a few changed the shape of history itself, hollowing out entire civilizations before anyone understood what was happening. We begin with pain. Pure, electric, unforgettable. The kind the human brain stores not as memory, but as revelation. An ant whose sting has been compared by the people who survived it to stopping a bullet with your hand. From there, we move through hornets capable of destroying 30,000 bees in under 3 hours, through water bugs that dissolve prey alive from the inside, through beetles whose venom Renaissance-caught poisoners kept in small glass bottles. Further up, caterpillars that kill through internal hemorrhage. Insects that kiss sleeping people in the dark and leave behind a disease that will surface 30 years later. A fly that rendered vast stretches of an entire continent functionally uninhabitable. And at the top, something the size of a sunflower seed, responsible for more human deaths than any war ever recorded. The order is not random. Think of it as a staircase. Each step is higher than the last. And by the time you reach the top, the numbers stop feeling abstract. The most painful insect sting in the world belongs to an ant that has no interest in harming you. The bullet ant, Paraponera clavata, is aggressive only when its colony is threatened. Every encounter between a human and this creature is, in some sense, a misunderstanding, except when the encounter is intentional. At number 13, the bullet ant earns its place through a combination of biochemistry and cultural history that is difficult to match anywhere in the natural world. This is an ant nearly 3 centimeters long, dark brown to black, with heavy mandibles and a stinger that under magnification looks less like an insect's weapon and more like a surgical instrument. It lives in the humid rainforests of Central and South America, ranging from Nicaragua south to Bolivia, preferring dense lowland canopy where it forages and builds its colonies in the soil. Entomologist Justin Schmidt spent years constructing a pain index for stinging insects, a methodical first-hand catalogue that required him to be stung by hundreds of species. He placed the bullet ant at level 4, the highest point on his scale, and the only insect to occupy that position. His description? Pure, pulsating, blinding pain, like walking over a bed of flaming charcoal with a 3-inch nail embedded in your heel. The venom contains a neurotoxin called toxin that bypasses the body's usual pain-filtering mechanisms and fires nerve cells directly, sustaining that agony for anywhere between 8 and 24 hours. The Satere Mawe people of the Brazilian Amazon built a warrior initiation rite around exactly this property. Hundreds of bullet ants are woven alive into gloves woven from plant fiber, sedated first with a stupefying herbal brew, then roused into fury at the moment of the ceremony. A young man slides his hands inside and keeps them there for 10 minutes. He must not make a sound. To become a full warrior, he repeats this ritual up to 20 times across several years. Temporary paralysis and violent, uncontrollable shaking follow each session. 13 means threshold here, pain as proof. But higher on this list, the threshold disappears entirely, and what remains is not ritual, it is consequence. Every year, a group of fewer than 50 insects kills 30 to 40 people in Japan. And that figure doesn't account for the tens of millions of honeybees they methodically dismember. Vespa mandarinia, the Japanese giant hornet, ranks 12th on this list, and the arithmetic of its lethality is worth examining closely. Start with the body, over 5 centimeters long with a wingspan approaching 8. The orange-yellow head is disproportionately large even for that frame, housing mandibles built less for feeding than for destruction. The stinger measures 6 millimeters and carries no barbs. That absence matters. A barbed stinger tears free and kills the insect that used it. A smooth stinger withdraws cleanly and drives in again, delivering venom with every strike. The venom is a compound of 8 bioactive components. One of them, neurotoxin, is a neurotoxin that degrades soft tissue at the cellular level. A single sting produces acute pain and localized necrosis. Multiple stings push the body toward renal failure and cardiovascular collapse. The human casualties are concentrated among forest workers and people who move through mountain terrain unaware of a nest nearby. But human deaths, dramatic as they are, represent a footnote in the hornet's ecological ledger. The real scale of its predation plays out against honeybee colonies. 30 to 40 hornets can eliminate a colony of 30,000 bees in under 3 hours. They do not sting them, they cut them apart, mandibles severing heads and limbs with the repetitive efficiency of a machine. What remains inside the hive is not a battlefield, it is a processing site. The hornets collect the thoracic muscle tissue of the dead bees, dense protein, and carry it back to feed their larvae. Japanese honeybees have evolved one counter-response. When a scout hornet enters the hive, hundreds of bees engulf it in a living sphere and vibrate their wings in unison, driving the internal temperature to 46 degrees Celsius, 1 degree above the hornet's thermal death point, 1 degree below their own. European honeybees introduced to Asia have no equivalent behavior. They die in full colonies, without answer. Number 11 on this list operates without that kind of spectacle. No swarms, no dismemberment, just contact. Number 11 on our list is an insect that regularly kills animals many times its own size, and it does so entirely underwater, without teeth, without venom in the traditional sense, and without making a sound. The giant waterbug, family Belostomatidae, is the reason swimmers in the American South, across Asia, and throughout sub-Saharan Africa have learned to be careful about where they place their feet. It looks like an unremarkable brown beetle drifting lazily near the surface. That ordinariness is the point. The largest species reach 12 centimeters in length, roughly the size of a human finger, and carry a biological toolkit that most predators twice their size would envy. The front legs are purpose-built grasping claws, modeled structurally on a scorpion's pincers, fast, powerful, and essentially inescapable once they close. The beak beneath the head is where the real chemistry happens. The moment it punctures prey, a cocktail of digestive enzymes floods in and begins breaking down muscle tissue and internal organs from the inside out. The bug does not eat its prey so much as it liquefies it first. Fish, frogs, newts, small water snakes. Documented prey. There are verified records of attacks on ducklings and other small waterfowl. For humans, a bite from a toe biter, which is exactly what Americans and Australians call it, is not lethal, but it is memorably painful. The same enzymes calibrated for vertebrate tissue produce immediate acute pain and localized inflammation in human skin. These insects are found in freshwater habitats across North and South America, Asia, and Africa. Several species have developed the ability to fly long distances at night, navigating by the reflection of moonlight off water, which is how they regularly end up in backyard swimming pools far from any natural wetland. In a detail that feels biologically counterintuitive for a creature this aggressive, it is the male that carries the eggs. The female attaches them directly to his back, where he tends them until they hatch. The same animal that can dissolve a frog alive turns out to be a dedicated parent. Our next entry shares none of that nuance. It's simply spread across the entire planet, quietly and with devastating effect. Its most dangerous weapon is its blood. The blister beetle, number 10 on our list, doesn't sting, doesn't bite, doesn't lunge. It bleeds, deliberately, precisely, and with chemical consequences that can outlast the contact by hours. When pressed, the beetle releases hemolymph through its leg joints in a process called reflex bleeding. And that fluid carries one of the most potent, naturally occurring toxins on Earth, cantharidin. Cantharidin is a terpenoid compound. By cellular toxicity, it exceeds potassium cyanide. Roughly 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight is enough to kill a human being. On skin, it destroys cell membranes and causes painful blisters that develop silently. No burning sensation at the moment of contact. Just damage that announces itself hours later. Ingested, it attacks the kidneys and urinary tract with a severity that leaves little room for recovery if the dose is sufficient. The family Meloidae contains approximately 3,000 species found on every continent except Antarctica. The most historically significant is Lyta vesicatoria, the so-called Spanish fly, a metallic green beetle up to 2 centimeters long, native to southern Europe and Central Asia. The name is a misnomer on 2 counts. It isn't Spanish and it isn't a fly. What it is, however, is the insect that gave cantharidin its name and its reputation. Renaissance-era court poisoners prized dried blister beetle powder for the same reasons a modern forger prizes a good ink: odorless, nearly colorless, soluble in wine, and slow enough in its effects to create distance between cause and consequence. Documented poisoning cases from Italian and French courts in the 16th and 17th centuries confirm its use, though the specific details of individual incidents have accumulated layers of legend over time. The beetle's threat is calibrated, almost bureaucratic in its patience. It marks what it touches and dissolves what it enters. Next on our list, the giant water bug operates on a completely different philosophy. No subtlety, no delay, just an ambush that reminds you, very suddenly, that you were never the top predator in that water. The venom of a killer bee is no more potent than that of a common honeybee found in any backyard garden. That single fact makes Africanized honeybees one of the most misunderstood and most underestimated dangers in the natural world. What earns them the 9th spot on our list has nothing to do with toxicology. It has everything to do with behavior. In 1956, Brazilian geneticist Warwick Kerr was trying to solve a practical problem. European honeybees struggled in tropical climates. His solution was to crossbreed them with East African subspecies, engineering a hardier, more productive hybrid. The experiment worked in a sense. What failed was containment. 26 hybrid swarms escaped, most likely after someone accidentally removed protective screens from the hives, and the consequences rippled across an entire hemisphere. An Africanized colony doesn't just sting, it mobilizes. When threatened, the swarm responds at a speed dozens of times faster than European bees, and with hundreds of times more individuals. A disturbed colony will pursue a target for over a kilometer. In a full assault, thousands of stings can be delivered within minutes. Documented casualties include not just humans, but entire herds of horses and cattle overwhelmed before they could flee. Over the decades since that laboratory accident, Africanized bees have been linked to hundreds of human deaths across North and South America. By the 1990s, they had crossed into the United States. They are still moving north. The cruelest part of this story may be the invisibility of the threat. There is no visual difference between an Africanized bee and a domestic honeybee. No marking, no size variation, no behavioral tell at rest. Only DNA analysis in a laboratory can make the distinction. The danger looks exactly like something harmless. Where the killer bee kills through sheer overwhelming force, our next entry operates on an entirely different principle. Precise, relentless, almost surgical. At number 8, the siafu ant. A single ant from this species can suture a wound. That same ant, multiplied by 20 million, can kill a human being. Both statements are true, and together they define what makes the siafu, Dorylus, the African driver ant, number 8 on our list. The surgical application is not folklore. For centuries, tribes across the continent pressed a soldier ant against the edges of an open wound, waited for its sickle-shaped mandibles to clamp shut, then twisted the body away. The head stayed locked in place, holding the tissue together like a living staple. No synthetic material, no sterilization required. The same mechanical force that makes these mandibles capable of piercing mammalian hide makes them a precise and reliable closure device. That is the paradox at the heart of the siafu, an instrument of both healing and destruction, depending entirely on whether you control the encounter or it controls you. A colony numbers up to 20 million individuals, moving as a single coordinated mass through savanna and rainforest. They build no permanent nest. The column itself, a dark, seething river, 30 centimeters wide and up to 50 meters long, is the colony's only home. What it passes over, it consumes. The mechanism of death is not venom. Siafu carry no meaningful toxin. They kill through volume and physics, mandibles entering the nostrils, the trachea, every accessible cavity, until the airways are blocked and the victim suffocates. This places them in a completely different category from venomous insects. There is no antivenom because there is no venom. There is no treatment for being in the path of 20 million determined jaws. Verified fatalities involve people who could not move, the elderly, the severely ill, infants, a tethered goat, a nestling that cannot fledge. When the column enters a village, residents leave immediately, and that collective wisdom has been earned over generations. The ants do not pursue, they simply advance, and whatever remains in their path is processed with total mechanical efficiency. Siafu flood forward in an unstoppable wave. The next entry on our list operates on the opposite principle. It does not move at all. It waits, nearly invisible on a leaf, and one brief contact is enough to start an irreversible internal bleed. A caterpillar kills more people in Brazil than most venomous snakes. That statement sounds wrong. It isn't. Lonomia obliqua holds the 7th position on this list, and the reason it belongs here has nothing to do with claws, fangs, or aggression. It has to do with chemistry so precise it dismantles the human body's ability to stop bleeding from the inside out. This caterpillar lives in the humid forests of southern Brazil, pressed flat against tree bark with a camouflage so effective that field researchers have documented people brushing their bare arms across entire clusters without realizing it until the symptoms begin. The body is covered in dense rows of hollow spines, arranged like miniature fir trees. Each spine is a hollow needle sitting above a venom reservoir. Skin contact, even momentary, snaps those spines. The toxin enters the bloodstream immediately. What follows is called lonomism, and it represents one of the most methodical biological attacks on coagulation known to medicine. The venom doesn't simply slow clotting, it dismantles the entire cascade at the molecular level. Fibrinogen breaks apart, platelets lose function. The victim begins hemorrhaging internally, often without acute pain at first, which delays the recognition of what is actually happening. Bleeding appears from the gums, the nose, the urinary tract. In severe cases, hemorrhage extends to the brain or major organs. Without treatment, fatalities occur. Treatment itself is severely constrained. The only antivenom on Earth is manufactured exclusively at Instituto Butantan in São Paulo. Patients are transported there from across the region, and the window between exposure and irreversible damage is not measured generously. Lonomia obliqua does not hunt. It does not pursue. It simply exists, invisible, on surfaces people touch every day. The lethality is entirely chemical, entirely silent, and entirely disproportionate to the creature responsible for it. If one caterpillar can do this, consider what comes next on this list. A bottle cap holds enough water to launch an epidemic. That is not a metaphor. The Asian tiger mosquito, Aedes albopictus, ranked 6th on this list, requires no more standing water than that to lay a viable clutch of eggs. And it will find that water in a flower pot saucer, a discarded can, a clogged rain gutter, or the drainage tray beneath an air conditioning unit. The sources are everywhere, and that ubiquity is precisely what makes this insect so difficult to contain. It crossed the Pacific inside used car tires. In 1985, a shipment of second-hand tires exported from Japan arrived in Texas, carrying dormant eggs in the residual rainwater pooled at the bottom of the rubber. From that single introduction, Aedes albopictus spread to more than 30 countries across Europe, the Americas, Africa, and the Middle East. It did not walk or fly across oceans. It rode the infrastructure of global trade, patient and invisible. The mosquito is visually distinctive. Stark white stripes on a jet black body and legs, a pattern that resembles tiger markings and gives the species its name. But that recognizability rarely triggers alarm. People see a mosquito and assume it belongs. That assumption is the opening it exploits. Unlike most mosquitoes, the tiger mosquito is a daytime hunter. Peak activity falls in the early morning and late afternoon, hours when people are outdoors and unguarded. The nighttime defenses that most of us rely on, bed nets, repellents applied before sleep, are irrelevant against an insect that does its work in daylight. It also feeds aggressively and repeatedly, interrupting a bite on one host to move immediately to another, a behavior that makes it an unusually efficient bridge for pathogens moving between people. Its viral portfolio includes more than 30 confirmed agents, dengue fever, chikungunya, and Zika virus among them. In 2007, an outbreak of chikungunya appeared in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, the first locally transmitted case of the disease ever recorded in Europe. Investigators traced it directly to a population of Aedes albopictus established in the area. A disease Europe had never known as endemic arrived because a mosquito had quietly made itself at home. This is 6th place. The entries that follow have not merely caused outbreaks, they have ended dynasties. At number 5, we have something that doesn't look like a killer. Dark brown, barely an inch long, with a narrow head and a slender proboscis tucked beneath it. The kissing bug moves through the world almost invisibly. No sting, no venom, no aggression. It simply waits. The triatomines, a subfamily of more than 140 species, live inside the walls of rural homes across Latin America. Clay cracks, thatched roofing, gaps beneath wooden beams. These are their sanctuaries. And the people sleeping inside those houses, that is something else entirely. The bug hunts by heat and breath. Carbon dioxide rising from a sleeping body is enough to guide it toward exposed skin, most often the lips or eyelids. The bite itself registers as almost nothing. The saliva contains an anesthetic. That particular detail is what gave this insect its name. But the bite is not the danger. What matters happens immediately after. The bug feeds, then defecates directly onto the skin. And in those feces lives Trypanosoma cruzi, a single-celled parasite that enters the body the moment a sleeping person touches their own face. Through the mucous membranes, through a scratch, through the corner of an eye. That is how Chagas disease begins, quietly, often without any symptoms at all in the early weeks. The parasite then retreats into a latent phase that can last 10 to 30 years, all while steadily dismantling heart muscle and digestive tissue. The end, when it comes, tends to arrive suddenly, cardiac failure in someone who appeared completely healthy. The World Health Organization currently estimates between 6 and 7 million people are infected worldwide. Some researchers have suggested that Charles Darwin himself may have been among them. In his journals, he describes being bitten by what he called a benchuca in Argentina in 1835, followed by decades of mysterious illness, including cardiac symptoms.
It remains a hypothesis, unproven but not dismissed.
Chagas disease kills without announcing itself, which makes it, in some ways, the most insidious entry on this list. A creature smaller than a grain of rice has killed more human beings than any war in recorded history. That is not a metaphor. That is what the evidence shows when you trace the mechanics of the Black Death back to their source. The oriental rat flea, Xenopsilla chiopis, measures less than 3 millimeters. It has no wings. Its body is compressed nearly flat, armored in brown chitin, lined with rows of stiff bristles that help it navigate through fur and fabric. Under magnification, nothing about it signals danger. But this insect is the reason between 30 and 50% of Europe's population was dead within a few years of 1347. The biology is what makes it so effective. When Yersinia pestis enters the flea's digestive system, it colonizes the proventriculus, a small valve between the esophagus and the stomach. The bacteria multiply until they form a dense, solid plug that completely obstructs the gut. The flea starves. Driven by hunger, it bites repeatedly, drawing blood that cannot pass through the blockage and is immediately forced back out, now saturated with living plague bacilli, into the open wound it just created. The infection mechanism is not incidental. It is written into the anatomy of the insect itself. The flea did not spread the plague alone. Its primary host was the black rat, a species that had long shared warehouses, ships, and harbour districts with human populations. When plague began killing rats in large numbers, their fleas moved to the next available warm body. The transmission chain, bacterium, flea, rat, human, functioned with the efficiency of a system that had been refined over millennia. In 1347, ships from Crimea docked at Messina in Sicily. The crew were dying. What followed emptied cities, collapsed administrative systems, and removed entire villages from the map permanently. Plague has not gone away. Outbreaks occur every year, concentrated in Madagascar, parts of Asia, and isolated regions of the Americas. Antibiotics work if the diagnosis comes early enough. Xenopsilla chiopis holds the 4th position on this list. The insect that follows it kills through an entirely different logic, slowly, silently, across decades rather than seasons. An insect smaller than your thumbnail has, over millions of years, developed a weapon biochemically more potent than the venom of a king cobra. That is not hyperbole. That is the assassin bug. The family Reduviidae contains over 7,000 species, and the vast majority are dedicated predators. Their defining instrument is a curved beak-like proboscis capable of striking with surgical accuracy. But the puncture itself is only the opening move. What follows is chemistry. The bug injects enzymatic saliva that, by several biochemical measures, is 10 times more toxic than the venom produced by the most dangerous reptiles on Earth. Within seconds, the victim's internal organs begin to dissolve. Cell walls fail. Tissues break down into a nutrient-rich fluid that the assassin bug draws back through the same channel it used to inject the toxin. The prey is consumed from the inside out, while still being held in the predator's grip, front legs folded in what looks unsettlingly like a posture of prayer. The reason this works so efficiently comes down to evolutionary pressure. Over vast stretches of time, these bugs refined both their delivery mechanism and their chemical payload to subdue prey faster than it can react. Speed of paralysis is survival. One African species has taken this logic further, into territory that feels closer to strategy than instinct. It collects the empty chitinous shells of ants and termites it has consumed, and methodically cements them onto its own body. The result is a mosaic armor of trophies that simultaneously breaks up the predator's silhouette and preserves the chemical signatures of the colony, effectively neutralizing the alarm responses of new targets. A living shield constructed entirely from the dead. For humans, the immediate danger is a bite that triggers severe acute inflammation. That alone earns the assassin bug its rank of number 3. But within Reduviidae sits the subfamily Triotominae, and those species carry something far worse than pain. Understanding how a bug this size reshaped the demographic history of an entire continent requires one more number: 30 to 50%. The tsetse fly doesn't kill you the way you'd expect a deadly insect to kill you. There's no venom, no swarm, no immediate agony. The bite is barely noticeable. That almost invisible moment of contact is precisely what makes Glossina the second most dangerous creature on this list, and one of the most insidious killers on the planet. When a tsetse fly bites, it can deliver Trypanosoma brucei, a single-celled parasite that causes African trypanosomiasis, better known as sleeping sickness. The early phase mimics dozens of other illnesses: fever, swollen lymph nodes, fatigue. Easy to dismiss, easy to misdiagnose. But the parasite is patient. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and invades the central nervous system. And that's when the disease reveals what it actually is. The body's ability to regulate sleep collapses. The patient falls asleep mid-sentence during the day, then lies awake in confusion and terror through the night. Hallucinations follow, then seizures, then coma. Without treatment, death is the only outcome. The World Health Organization has documented periods in the 20th century when sleeping sickness depopulated entire villages across sub-Saharan Africa. The fly itself is unremarkable to look at, a brownish insect about 1.5 centimeters long, but its reproductive biology is extraordinary. The tsetse doesn't lay eggs. The female carries a single larva inside her body and nourishes it with a secretion functionally similar to milk. This means a catastrophically slow reproduction rate, which sounds like good news until you realize the consequence. There are no external eggs or larvae to target. Every control strategy that works against most insects simply doesn't apply here. Glossina occupies roughly 10 million square kilometers of Africa south of the Sahara. Livestock bitten by the fly die from nagana, an animal form of trypanosomiasis. That single biological fact turned enormous stretches of the continent into land that couldn't support farming or herding, shaping economic and demographic barriers that persist to this day. Next on the list is an insect whose impact goes even further. It didn't just kill people, it redirected the course of human civilization. Almost half of every human being who has ever lived may have been killed by the same creature. Not a predator, not a plague, a mosquito. Specifically, the female Anopheles, a 2-centimeter insect with dusty brown-grey wings and a resting posture so unremarkable you would walk past 1,000 of them without concern. The World Health Organization does not hedge on this. Anopheles is officially the deadliest biological adversary in the entire history of our species. Over 1 million people die from malaria every year, and that is only the modern count. The reason it kills so efficiently comes down to engineering. What looks like a bite is actually a coordinated surgical procedure, carried out by 6 needle-like stylets working in parallel. Some spread tissue, some probe for a capillary, some inject saliva loaded with anticoagulants to keep blood flowing. That saliva is the delivery mechanism for Plasmodium falciparum, a parasite that can collapse a human body within days. The history of civilization is, in part, a history of this insect's influence. Malaria thinned the armies of Alexander the Great on multiple campaigns, and a number of historians place it among the likely causes of Alexander's death at 32. Roman legions were stopped not by enemy forces, but by malarial lowlands. The French attempt to build the Panama Canal collapsed under the weight of malaria and yellow fever casualties before American engineers restructured the entire project around mosquito eradication as its primary engineering challenge. In the Pacific theater of World War II, malaria killed more Allied soldiers than Japanese weapons did. The current situation offers no comfort. Anopheles populations are developing resistance to insecticides at a rate that consistently outpaces new chemical solutions. Climate change is pushing the mosquito's viable range upward into mountain altitudes and northward into temperate zones that were previously inhospitable to its breeding cycle. A vaccine exists and represents genuine progress, but its protection remains incomplete. Number 1 on this list is not the most dramatic-looking insect, nor the one that causes the sharpest pain. It is simply the most effective killer the animal kingdom has ever produced at human scale, a creature weighing a fraction of a gram that has quietly outmaneuvered humanity across every century of recorded history. 13 insects. 13 reasons to look more carefully at the world around you. The deadliest creature on Earth weighs less than a paperclip. That single fact dismantles every instinct we have about what danger looks like. 13 species. 13 reasons why size is the least reliable measure of threat. The Anopheles mosquito leads this reckoning, not with venom or claws, but with a parasite it carries without consequence to itself, and deposits into roughly 1 million humans every year who do not survive the encounter. No weapon in recorded history has maintained that kill rate. The Japanese giant hornet illustrates a different principle, that intelligence amplifies destruction. 30 hornets do not fight 30,000 honeybees, they dismantle them, systematically. The venom liquefies muscle, the mandibles behead. 3 hours is enough to end a colony that spent years building itself. The bullet ant makes this list because it chose pain as a social instrument. Indigenous communities in the Amazon use it precisely because the sting, rated at the absolute ceiling of the Schmidt Pain Index, lasting up to 24 hours, is something that cannot be faked or negotiated. The young man who endures it earns a status that has no equivalent in any document. The giant water bug dissolves its prey from the inside, with injected saliva while the prey remains alive, then drinks the result. The assassin bug, demonstrating something closer to strategy, coats its own body with the corpses of previous victims and uses them as armor. The blister beetle carries cantharidin, a toxin that makes cyanide look like a blunt instrument. The Africanized honeybee exists because in 1957, 26 queens escaped a laboratory in São Paulo. That accident has since killed people on 2 continents who had no idea a decision made in a research facility decades earlier was relevant to their afternoon. Siafu ants move as a single organism. 50 million individuals. Entire African villages vacate at night when the column approaches, not out of tradition, but necessity. The Lonomia caterpillar requires no bite. Its spines deliver anticoagulants that trigger internal hemorrhage on casual contact. The kissing bug requires no urgency either. It deposits Trypanosoma cruzi during sleep and lets the parasite quietly destroy the heart muscle over the following decade. The Asian tiger mosquito arrived in a used tire. It now transmits dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and a growing catalogue of viruses across 5 continents. A passenger that has thoroughly outlasted whatever journey it arrived on. The rat flea wrote its most famous chapter in the 14th century, when it helped to raise 1/3 of Europe's population. It has not retired. The tsetse fly holds entire African territories in a kind of biological embargo, not through its own toxicity, but as the vector for sleeping sickness that makes those lands hostile to both livestock and farming. None of these species are aggressive in any way that requires intention. They are not targeting us. They are operating on evolutionary logic far older than our presence on this planet. The appropriate response is not fear, it is precision. Learn the mechanisms. Respect the distance these histories demand. The smallest organisms alive today have altered human civilization more decisively than most armies ever will.